This is Gemara in Rosh HaShanah, Daf Dalit, today's Shir, and this week of the Shirim have been sponsored. L'schos myself and the entire Chabura. I thank Rav Mordechai for the schos to be able to partake in all the learning together, and it should be a schos for myself to be able to give these Shirim and everyone else to be able to learn together. And the schos of all of our learning should just be bringing continuous clarity, chazara, and more Torah to all of us. And of course, as Chashidach Yizochaim and the very Shir Miriam Basri, Zalgitol Hashem Lezer Bashan Amakal Yor Mordechai and the Vashendel, as Zalgitol Bas the Vashendel, and as well as schos for Hashem has been in your faith, man, and social seed in Israel, Idol, Sarbas, Canendel, Idabasimas, Chaisa, Solomon, Mandela, as a person, Shalay, Shamas, Nami, Bishop, Shekhan, Shmom, Matil, Machan Rizal, Milka, Chaya, Basmin, Libracha, Bastamamuna, Dina, Innovation, Windows, Sweep, and Vegaran, and Khalizur, and Salahur, because Hashem tells him, Lester. We're holding on the last line of Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We pulled up, it's a bit in the middle of a sugya, but it was getting late yesterday, so let's give a bit of an outside recap of where we're holding in the middle of this Persian Empire, the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. We spoke about the Nevi'im of Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, the restarting of the Beis HaMikdash being built, and this is the critical ingredient, was during the kingdom of Daryavish. The second Daryavish, we mentioned that they're called Artaxshasta, which is the Persian way of saying king of Pharaoh, etc. They're all referred to as same. So basically, during the reign of Daryavish II, Chagay and Zachariah told him to start again to build the second Beis HaMikdash, and Daryavish said it's okay. He heard and he looked into it that his great grandfather was one that started it the first time, so he let them to continue, and that's the reason why we said that Daryavish was counted from Nisan, like a Jewish king, because he was a good guy. But we had a problem that we had another pasuk that showed us that Daryavish was counted from Tishrei, like a Goyish king. What's going on? So the Gemara we concluded with yesterday was kan koidim shechmetz, kan la'acha shechmetz. One was before he soured, literally, he turned bad, he stopped being a good king, and one is when he's afterwards, so one is before and one is after. But now the Gemara is bothered. Maskiv la Rav Kahana on the last line of Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Umi hechmet, is it true that Daryavish really went off the derech? Not the derech, wasn't Jewish, but is it true that he stopped being a good king? But we learned in the Navi, turning over to Daled Amud Aleph, says the pasuk, Uma choshtan. Excuse me, 1 second. Says the pasuk on Daled Amud Aleph. Where is my pasuk? Here it is. And this is a list of all the ingredients that Daryavish allowed them to be brought to build the Beis HaMikdash. Whatever they want, the Bnei Turan, they want young bulls, V'dichron and rams, V'amarin and sheep, La'ilin for carbon oila, La'ila Shemaya for their Hashem, referring to our God in heaven. Chantin, they want wheat, Melach, they want salt, Chamar, they want wine, Umeshach, and they want oil. Kemamar, Kahana, whatever the Kehanim need, Tibi Yerushalayim, the New Yerushalayim, Lahu Misiyava, they should be supplied to them, Lam Yoim B'Yoim, Dai Loi I should say Shalu. Obviously, this is all Aramaic, as you can see on the side over here. Where's my side? This is a pasuk in Ezra in the Aramaic, Shalu, that they should give it to them every day without fail. So what's going on? Daryavish is sending Ezra, and he's telling them, you can get whatever you need to build the walls of Yerushalayim, whatever you need for the Karbanos, whatever you need for the Kehanim. Sounds like he was a great guy. What's going on? Why are you telling me that Daryavish soured? Amar Lai. So he answered, Amar Lai Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Yitzchak is the first teretz. Rebbe, Meitunach, from your load, meaning from the pasuk you just quoted, I'll prove to you that Daryavish really wasn't so good. You're showing me that seemingly Daryavish had good intentions. I'm going to prove to you not. Because what does the end of the pasuk say? Dai lahoin me'akravin. The end of the pasuk says, Di lehavoin me'akrivin, nichoichin le'elo shemayo umaxlin l'chayim malka b'nohi. That he should offer all these karbanis, mahakriv nichochayin, but the pasuk ends off, why le'elo shemayo to their God in heaven? But why? Umaxlin l'chayim malka b'nohi. Daryavish was allowing them to bring the karbanis for what reason? For me, for the king and my children. I want the Jews to bring karbanos. I'm going to give them all the supplies. For what reason? That my children should be able to have long life, to be able to be good in the eyes of Hashem. So we see that he had selfish motives. The first raya that Daryavish indeed is soured. Just to see what's going to happen right now, we're going to have 4 different sources that Daryavish indeed was not a good king anymore. The 4th source we're going to fall off. So the first, and again, we came on to bringing this out because we had a stira contradiction in Psukim, whether Daryavish was a good king or a bad king. Do we count him from Nisan like a Jewish king? Do we count him from Tishrei like a not Jewish king? And the Gemara answered, one is before he soured, one is after, one is when he was good and when he was not good. So now the Gemara is bothered, but we seemingly see in the Torah, in the Navi, that he wasn't good. So we're going to have 4 answers why, indeed, we see in the Navi that he was good. We're going to have 4 answers why he was not. Answer number 1 was because he had selfish motives. He didn't supply the karbanis for the Jews, he did it for himself. Says the Gemara, the question which I'm sure is bothering many people right now. It's true, he had bad intentions, but at the end of the day, he did something good. Vatanya, we all know, famous Braisa. If someone says, I'm giving suck, but you know why? I'm doing it so my son should have long life. I'm doing it for a schos. I'm doing it so he should go to Olam Haba. What's going on? We have a clear pasuk that teaches me you're allowed to give stakal tonight. You're allowed to say I'm doing it for my son. I'm allowed to do it for a schos. So what was the problem? Why was the Yavish not allowed to give all this food and all these animals so that his children should be alive? Answers the Gemara, fascinating teretz, a teretz, an answer. Many different explanations. Says the Gemara like Hasha, can be Israel, can be by a Jew, by a Yid, we're allowed to do things and do it for our children's chus, etc. But a guy is not. Now, why not? So let's see Rashi's pshat first. Rashi says in the first narrow line, says Rashi, can be Yisrael sheli boy l'shamayim, because we have good intentions. Meaning, even if we give tzedakah for a chus, for this, for that, what happens? Let's say it doesn't work. Someone gives tzedakah that is so much have a refuah shlema, and the person doesn't have a refuah shlema. What does a Jew say? He doesn't have tainas on Hashem. He says it must be my averos, etc. So a yid is allowed to give tzedakah for a schus, for a reason, because at the end of the day, deep down, even if it doesn't work, he's not going to have any complaints. He's going to know that it's his own fault. When it comes to a guy, says Rashi, but a guy, if he doesn't get what he wants, immediately says, this God is worthless. So that's the teretz number 1, says the Gemara, the Yavish was not good. Why? Because he only gave the karbanis for his own sake. Answer number 2, first word in line is Ema, 10 lines down. How do we know that he soured? The pasuk says, "Nidv'chan di avin galul." It's referring to the building of the second Beis Hamikdash. Nidv'chan di avin galil talasa. There were 3 rows of marble, and then v'nidv'ch di achadat, and there was 1 row of wood. V'navkasa min Beis Hamalka tis yahiv, and it should be provided from the expenses of the king. 3 rows of marble and 1 row of wood. Lama le David Achi. Interesting. Why do they build this way? Either build wood or build marble. Why is he building the walls of the Beis Hamikdash and supplying the utensils and giving all the money for 3 rows of marble, 1 row of wood? Says the Gemara, you know why? He had evil intentions. Savar, this Daryavish thought, Imar dubi Yudai, let's see the Jews rebel. Ikloi benura, that what? I'll be able to light the Beis Hamikdash on fire. He purposely added a layer of wood so we could torch the Beis Hamikdash. Evil intention. So it seems like he's good. He's giving all the money for the building. No, he's not. Deep down, he's doing it in a conniving way so that if one day he ever needs, he can light the walls on fire. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Not to Shlomo Lavid Achi. Shlomo HaMelech did this. Fuck, save the pasuk says with regard to Shlomo HaMelech, Shlosha Turei Gazis, 3 rows of hewn stones, Vitor, Korsis Harazin, and a row of cedar beams. So Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis Hamikdash with wood. So how are you telling me he did it with wood in order to torch the Beis Hamikdash? Shlomo did the same thing. Answers the Gemara, 3 different fundamental differences between Shlomo's building and Daryavish. Shlomo avid milmala, Yavid milmata. He put the wood on the bottom, so he could light it on fire. Shlomo shika bevinyana, Shlomo made a recessed in. Ilo shika bevinyana, he made it outwards, so he could light it on fire. Shlomo sadi besida, he covered it with lime, so it's not flammable. Ilo sadi besida. So 3 reasons why Daryavish obviously had bad intentions, and that is the reason, says the Gemara. The second source, I should say, says the Gemara, that the Yavish indeed soured, that he was no longer a good king. And says the Gemara, continuing, Amar Rav Yosef Yidemer Rav Yitzchak. Minal and Dechmetz, I'll tell you another source. Says Rav Yosef, what is another source that he was hechmet me'acha? This is the third source. Vayomer li hamelech, and to me, says the king, Daryavish v'shagal yesheves etzli, and the shagal, which is a dog, as we'll see, but we'll see exactly what it means. And the dog was sitting next to him. My shagal. What does it mean that Daryavish is sitting there and he has his shagal next to him? Amar Rabba bar Lema mishmei derav. Kalvasa. It was a female dog, and Rashi points out it wasn't just a female dog sitting on the throne. He was a disgusting individual, this Daryavish. Kalvasa lemishkav. Sodomy used to sleep with this dog, and that's obviously showing that he was not a good king. And interesting, a bit timely, when the parashiyos of the Bnei Noach, Avram, etc., Rashi points out, we'll see very quickly, Bnei Noach chuzru al kach. Bnei Noach also are now allowed to sleep with animals. Just an interesting detail. The reason being, because it says in the Torah that Adam and Chava were Nasem Basar Echad, and therefore it has to be a union that can produce a offspring, and obviously with an animal that's not possible. So says the Gemara, the third source that Daryavish was no longer a good king was the fact that he had this kalvasa, he had this shagal, he had this dog, which indeed was a partner for him, unfortunately, and that was proving that he was not a good king. Ask the Gemara, there's a different pasuk that says, and unto the kingdom of heaven you are exalted, and the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash Hayatav Kadmach were brought in front of you. Va'ant, and you, Rav Nach, and your noble Shagalasecha, and your Shagal, that same word that we just had. Ulechanasecha, and to your concubines. What did all these people do? Cham Rashatin behind. They all drink wine. Says the Gemara, what's going on? If you're telling me it's a dog, how does the pasuk in Navi say that this Shagal, this dog, is drinking wine? Says the Gemara, and the Gemara articulates, Vi Shagal Kalvasai. Kalvasa Bas Mishtay Chamra, could a dog drink wine? Answers the Gemara, Halakash, that's not a big deal. He thought the dog had a drink. No big deal. Says the Gemara, 1 second, let me add on the first one line. A different pasuk says. What does the pasuk say? The B'nai Malachim, the daughters of kings honor you. Nitzvah shagali minecha, and the shagal stands on your right. Kikesem oifir, like a shining oifir, like a shining pearl. Vishagal, and if the shagal is a kalvasi, he's a dog. Maikam avaslu nabli yisrael. What's the comparison over here? If it's referring to a dog, what is he comparing Kaisel to a dog, like a diamond? What does the whole pasuk mean? Answers the Gemara, an interesting Kamar Bischar. For the reward. We love Torah like an Avodah Zarah likes a dog. Because of that, we get this Kesem, we get this wonderful jewel. So now again, we're sticking with this pshat that the shagal is a dog. We're just making sure it fits with all the psukim in Navi. Viba is Ema, and another way of learning the shagal, Lailam shagal makas. He really means queen. For Rav Bar Lema Gemara Gemirla, he has a tradition. V'maikra shagal. Why did he call, if it was a queen, why did he call it a dog? Sheis chaviva love keshagal. It was dear to him as a queen, meaning the dog was dear to him as a queen. Fascinating sight. You have a king Daryavish sitting there on the throne, and what do you have next to him? A dog. He doesn't have a queen. He loved the dog so much. A bit of a high level of insanity. Inami sheshiv makam shagal. He sat her and sat the dog in the place where the queen would sit. So that's the third source that Daryavish obviously was not a great guy for the fact that he had a dog as a queen. He was sleeping with her, etc. Viba Yisema, says the Gemara, a potential fourth source. Minalan te'echmetz. We're in 6 lines into the white lines. What does the pasuk say? That Daryavish says, "Ad kesef kikaron meya," until 100 talents of silver, bad chantin kikaron meya, and to 100 kur of wheat, bad chamar batin meya, and to 100 baths of wine, bad batin mashach meya, until 100 baths of oil, umelech, and salt, the likes of unlimited amount of salt. So Daryavish says, take all the utensils that you need. So says the Gemara, so why is that a bad thing? Because Meikara, originally when Daryavish gave them utensils for building the Beis Hamikdash, but like Kitzutza, he didn't limit it to 100 this, 100 that. He said, take as much as you want. And now he's giving them a limit, showing us obviously Daryavish is no longer the great king that he was. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Maybe Lavi Kimle, maybe the beginning He didn't know how much they need. Maybe in the beginning he didn't know how much they need. And then he found out how much they need. So he said, okay, great, take 100, this is how much they needed. Why does this show necessarily that he's being stingy? Meaning we don't know the amounts that they needed. Says Gemara, you're right. Let's stick with the first three terutzim, the first three reasons that the Yavish went off the derech, and we'll just speak out what were the three. Was that number one is that when he supplied the materials for all the karbanis, etc., said Rav Yitzchak, he did it for his own sake. He did it for his Leman Echia Beni. He did it so his children shall live, and only Jews could give tzedakah for that, and not Goyim. The second was that he put the wood around the base of Mikdash. Shlomo Melech did the same, but he did it in order to torch it. He did it on the bottom. He did it outside. He did not do recess, and he did not cover it over with lime. And the third one was the fact that he had this shaggle, he had this queen, this dog that he slept with sitting next to him. Three sources that their Yavish indeed soured, and those were the answers to the psukim from yesterday, that some psukim were going to list the Yavish from Tishrei like a Goyish king because he was no longer a good king, whereas other psukim were listed from Nisan because originally he was a good king. He let them rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash. Says the Gemara about 7 lines from the bottom, back into the Mishnah, Ula Regalim. We said in the Mishnah that what is Nisan? Nisan is the Rosh HaShanah for Malachim. That was the last 3 days. And now Regalim for all Yom Tovim. Ask the Gemara, 1 second. Regalim Bechel B'Nisanu. What regal on the 1st of Nisan? Bechamisha Asar B'Nisanu. It's on the 15th of Nisan. Amar Rav Chisda Regel Shaboy Rosh HaShanah Regalim. No, what the Mishnah meant was that the Regalim inside the month of Nisan is the first one of the Regalim. Meaning, Pesach is the first of the Regalim. Who cares? Nafkamina. What's the relevance? Le'noider le'mikam alev about the acher. So it makes a neder. So makes a vow that I'm going to give such and such to the Beis HaMikdash, as we'll see. Then there's a din you have to pay by a certain time, and if you don't pay by that time, you're over in a din of Baal Ta'acher. You prolong too long to giving. So from the fact that we know that Pesach is the first of the Regalim, then we'll know about being over in Baal Ta'acher. And the Gemara explains, Rav Shimoni, we're going with Rav Shimon. The Tana going to the Brayso. Someone who makes a neder, a vow, someone who consecrates something to the Beis HaMikdash. Someone says he's going to give his own values to the Beis HaMikdash. Of Gimel Regalim, when 3 Regalim pass by, Iver Baal Ta'acher. Any 3, says the Tanakama. Rav Shimon Aimer says, Rav Shimon, Gimel Regalim Kisidra, no, you're only Iver if 3 pass by in a row. What does in a row mean? Starting with the first. What's the first? Nisan, Pesach, Chag HaMatzos, Tchila. And similarly, the Gemara explains, Rav Shimon Yechai Aimer, Regalim, Pam, Gimel, Pam, Dalet, Pam, Hey. When you're Iver Baal Ta'acher, there are times you would pass by 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. Ketzad, says the Gemara, what does that mean? No, we made a neder before Pesach Gimel, because then Pesach comes as 1 Shavuos Sukkos. Levnei Atzeres, you made a neder before Shavuos Chamisha, because then you have Shavuos Sukkos, and then Pesach Shavuos Sukkos, because you have to pass by the Pesach Shavuos Sukkos in order. Levnei Achag Sukkos Arba, you're going to have 4, and that's the relevance of knowing that Nisan is the Rosh HaShanah. For Regalim, to be over about the Acher, according to the opinion of Rav Shimon, about the Acher starts with Nisan, it starts with Pesach. Tana Rabbanan says the Brayso now we're going to have for the rest of the day, we're going to segue into the dinim of Baal Ta'acher. All the dinim again of when you consecrate, when you make a neder, when you give your value, any of these things, like we'll see in a moment, you have a specific amount of time to pay. What is that time? That time is 3 Regalim, said Rav Shimon. That's the relevance of our Mishnah. Tana Rabbanan, let's see a Brayso, 2 lines from the bottom. Chayvei Adamim, if someone is obligated the payment of the value of harachim, his value, or he makes a cherem, or he makes hektish, he gives an item to the Beis HaMikdash, or he says this item has kedusha, chatais, he has to bring a karban chatas, v'ashamais, oilais u'shlamim, all different karbanis, tzedakos, he has to give tzedakah, meisers, he has to give meiser, b'char, u'meiser, u'pesach, or he has to bring the karban pesach. Any of these items turning over Tamid Beis, or leket shicha and beya, you have to give the requisite parts from your field to the aniyim. What are the halachos? When do you have to pay this up by? So now we're going to have 5 different opinions when you're over in Baal Ta'acher. Opinion we already saw in Amud Aleph, Rav Shimon's opinion, who we said it's 3 Regalim starting with Pesach. Now we're going to have 5 opinions in the Brayso. Opinion number 1 was similarly to opinion number 1 in the Brayso on Amud Aleph. The Tanakama says 3 Regalim in any order. Rav Shimon Aimer says Rav Shimon, like we saw already, Shalish Regalim Kisidram v'Chag HaMatzos Tchila. Opinion number 2. Opinion number 3, Rameir Mekim Shav Aleim Regel Echad. over about the acher. Even if one yontif pass, you're over. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov Eimer Kivin Shavaleim Shnei Regalim over about the acher. Once two yontif pass, and Rav Elazar Rav Shimon Eimer Kivin Shavaleim Chagas Sukkos over them about the acher. So we have the first two opinions that say you have to pass by all three, either in any order, says the Tanna Kama, or starting with Pesach, says Rav Shimon. And then we have the latter three opinions that either one regal, two regalim, or sukkis. Says the Gemara, my time with the Tanna Kama. And now we're going to go through all five different opinions. Where do they know it from? What each opinion holds of the other. In classical Gemara sense, we're not going to finish this today because it's going to take us all the way into tomorrow's daf. But says the Gemara, my time with the Tanna Kama, let's get started. Where did the Tanna Kama get that if you pass any three regalim, you're over about the acher. Mechti, let's see. Minayu Salik. The Torah is in the middle of listing in the Psukim. We just read these Psukim on Yantif. The Torah is in the middle of talking about all three of the regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos. And then the pasuk says, as you can see on the side, if you want to look at the Psukim, then right, Shalish Pamim Bashana is talking about the Shalish regalim. And then Lamali Lamad Lemechta Chag Matzos, Chag Shavuos, Chag Sukkos. So why did the pasuk have to then say Chag Matzos, Chag Shavuos, Chag Sukkos? That's irrelevant. That's unnecessary. It's extraneous. Shema Mina, you know what it teaches us? Labal Tacher. Says the Tanna Kama, the Torah went out of the way at the end of the Psukim to say Chag Matzos, Chag Shavuos, Chag Sukkos to teach me, even though we know what we're referring to. It could have just said Shalosh Regalim. To teach me, you have to pass by all three in order to be over in Baal Ta'acher in any order, says the Tanna Kama. For Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon says, Einoi Tzarech Leimer V'Chag Sukkos. Really, it didn't have to say Chag Sukkos, because if you look at the Torah, it's talking about the three regalim, but the last one it said was Chag Sukkos. So that one, it for sure didn't have to say again. Meaning, I understand they repeated it. Why? To teach me you have to pass by three regalim to be over about the acher. But why do you have to say Chag Sukkos? We know that one. We just spoke about it a moment ago. That was the last one on the list. Shaboy Dibra HaKosov, that was last on the list. So Lama Namar. That Sukkot always has to be last, which by definition means Pesach has to be first. That's for Shimon Shita. They have to have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. V'Rameir, where did Rameir get his day? And the Rameir says one regal. My time out d'chsev ubasa shama v'esav shama. It says when you go up to the Eila regal, you come there and you bring there. If you don't bring there, if you don't bring your karbanos, your nadarim, your nadavos, your chayim, etc., you're over. Very simple, says Rameir. V'Rabbanan. What is Rabbanan here means? The other opinions, the first two opinions in the Brisa. Ha'olah say, the Bas Hashem is giving you that say. You have a positive commandment to bring up what you have to. Rameir says, yes, it's an essay. And if you don't do the essay, if you don't do the positive commandment, then Baal Ta'acher is the flip side of the positive commandment. That's the machlekes in Rameir and the first two opinions. That's the first three opinions in the Brisa. And now let's finish with the last two opinions. The plural moyadichem, moyadim shnayim. V'Rabbanan, they argue what are they? Rav Yoina. That's teaching us a different halacha. Rav Yoina, Okshu kol moyadim kulam all the Yom Tovim are equated zelazeh. She'kulam mechabron al tumas mikdash kedashav. A different halacha. We spoke about this in Gemara and Yuma. That the Yontif is the karbanos of Yontif. Give a kapara, give an atonement for anyone who was over and coming into the Beis Hamikdash or eating a karban while he was tamei. So that's where Rameir gets his halacha. Excuse me, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov gets his halacha from moyadichem in the plural. Rav Elazar Rav Shimon, where does he get my taimo? Where did he get just sukkis? The Tanya Rav Elazar Rav Shimon Aimer lo yemer chag sukkis b'diar kasav. Very similar to what Rav Shimon said. It didn't have to say chag sukkis because we were just talking about it. So Rav Shimon said, for the fact that it repeated it shows us you need all three, and sukkis is last. But what does Rav Elazar Rav Shimon say? No, lama nemar. Why does it repeat sukkis? Loimer shazeh goyrim. That is the goyrim. If you pass by sukkis, you're over even by itself. And those are the five opinions in the Brisa. Says the Gemara, we'll just learn a few more lines. Rav Elazar, Rameir, Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, Haybe Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, my Darshibe. Rameir and Rav Elazar ben Yaakov learned that from a random pasuk. Ubasa Shama ve'Vesim Shama, or Moyadichem. So what do they do with the fact that the Torah repeats the Shalosh Regalim, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos? What do they do with that halacha? Mi ba'ilech Rav Elazar, Amar Rav Aisha, Amar Rav Elazar, Rav Aisha, Minayin Latzeres Ish V'Tashlum Manu Halacha. With this, we're going to conclude. How do you know that Shavuos has a din of Tashlum? tashlumim kol shiva. That if you didn't bring your carbon on Shavuos, you have 7 days after Shavuos to bring tashlumim, to bring that carbon. Talmud loymar, the Torah says, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, Makish Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaMatzos. The Torah equates Shavuos to Pesach. Ma Chag HaMatzos, each of the days to pay back if you didn't bring the carbon. Chag HaShavuos, each of the tashlumim kol shiva. We're going to stop over here because it's going to bring us into a much lengthier discussion tomorrow. But basically, just to give a quick synopsis of this last piece of the Gemara, there were 5 opinions about the Achar. The first 2 opinions held the Shalosh Regalim, Tanakama, in any order of Shimon, starting with Pesach, ending in Sukkot. Rameir said 1, Rav Laz ben Yaakov said 2, and Rav Laz Rav Shimon said Sukkot. We just concluded with the din that what does Rav Laz ben Yaakov and Rameir, who said that the pasuk of Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, they don't need, because they use a different pasuk. Upasa Shama Vavesim Shama says Rameir, or Moyadechem says Rav Shimon. So what do they do with the fact that Torah says the Gimel Regalim again? Teaches a new halacha, that when it comes to Shavuos, you still have 7 days. Even though Shavuos is only 1 day, you still have 7 days to pay back if you didn't bring a carbon. How do I know that? Because the Torah equates Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos to teach me. Just like by Matzos and just like Pesach and Sukkos, you have 7 days. So to Shavuos, and of course tomorrow we're going to pick up from here where we're going to ask the obvious question, but Sukkos you have 8 days. We'll pick up from here tomorrow in Mirza Hashem.